It's WWF Wrestlemania 2000, released in 1999 for the Nintendo 64, courtesy of THQ and developer Aki, the same folks who brought you those wonderful WCW video games on the same system. This would be the first video game released under the new WWF THQ partnership that would kick off the big wrestling video game changeover of 1999, with WCW jumping ship to Electronic Arts for a couple games before being bought off by the WWF, while former WWF licensee Acclaim Entertainment would make some games based on ECW before that promotion and eventually Acclaim themselves would be out of business. Clear to see who got the better end of that deal, but I digress. So Wrestlemania 2000 was a fine way to kick off a new era of WWF video games, because it was the same game you played over at WCW NWO territory, but now you could use this engine to play as your favorite WWF superstars, and some of the spares you may have forgotten about. And Jim Ross, because sure, why not? Not only that, but for the first time in one of these games, you actually got some women to play with. Although this having come out in '99 when the women's division was mostly TNA and puppies, it's slim pickings at best, but hey, there's always no mercy, but that's another story. The feature set is quite extensive here too, the main thing being the Road to WrestleMania, which is something akin to a season mode, where you pick a WWF superstar or a wrestler of your own making, you play through a typical year of WWF, fighting on Monday Night Raw as War and Sunday Night Heat because SmackDown wasn't a thing yet, the occasional pay-per-view, up until you reach the showcase of the Immortals itself, WrestleMania, which uses the WrestleMania 15 set, but we'll let that slide because WrestleMania 2000, the event, wasn't a thing yet. Playing through this mode is how you'll unlock additional superstars such as Jim Ross and Gerald Briscoe. Yippee. Besides that, you have a King of the Ring tournament, which is something that was in World Tour in all but name, Royal Rumble match, singles, tag teams, and for the first time in the series, you can compete within the confines of a steel cage or partake in a first blood match, wherein whoever bleeds first loses. So there's a lot more added to this compared to the WCW output. Again, that is to be expected as this series progressed. As far as Create a Wrestler goes, it's actually pretty detailed. Lots of parts to choose from to assemble your creation's physical attributes, a rather extensive list of wrestling moves to choose from in building your creation's moveset. Much like in Revenge, you could alter pre-existing wrestlers' attires and names, but just in terms of creating your very own, male-only, WWF superstars or trying to recreate wrestlers from other federations, this is as good a feature as you would have gotten at the time, and only a follow-up title could hope to, well, follow up and improve upon. There's also the Create a Pay-Per-View mode where you can put together your own little pay-per-view cards. Not the most exciting thing back in the day, but a little something to add to the back of the box, so I can't entirely fault them for that. Finally, there's Create a Belt, where you create a belt and defend against other people, and that's fine, I guess, I suppose. But then we get to the meat and potatoes of WrestleMania 2000, and that's the gameplay, which has been retained from Revenge and still holds up exceptionally well. So going from those early WCW games to this one shouldn't be much of a problem. It's still the same balanced pacing, weak and strong moves, building up your now former Spirit meter, which has been redubbed the Attitude meter, which fits the overall package more. First-timers will, again, probably need to familiarize themselves with the controls, which aren't too bad. They're roughly the same as in Revenge. You can move around in a grapple, which feels like a new thing, but that's about it. And that's okay, because what's there is perfectly fine as is, and one thing that they never really needed fixing. The Road to WrestleMania is a nice addition, some semblance of a season mode as opposed to the usual beat everyone to win the belt as was the case in past games, though the game does ramp up the difficulty after a while, which puts a ceiling on some lower tier players. The game even keeps track of who's been champion, though it would have been nice if you could defend those proper titles outside that Road to WrestleMania, but then that's what Create a Belt is for. You make a belt, you have it defended in modes and contested in tournaments, and yeah. But the one thing about WrestleMania 2000 is that it's a WWF game through and through. There is virtually nothing in this game that wasn't featured in some form or fashion on WWF television at the time. There's no weird Japanese wrestler repackages, no round robin or league challenges, nothing that feels out of place in this sort of environment beyond anything created by the player's hand. This doesn't feel like a slapdash repackage of another game. This is its own thing, with the only commonality being the gameplay engine, and that's a good thing. So the presentation is not bad as a whole. Graphically speaking, WrestleMania 2000 is on par with the visual quality of WCW NWO Revenge, which is a fine-looking wrestling game on its own right. The character models once again look fairly slick and animate well enough by the standards of the hardware, though still a little rough in some places. You have a number of arenas that recreate the actual sets, the pay-per-view sets as best as possible, which naturally boosts the visual quality compared to the SmackDown games, which had like 3 arenas at most. WrestleMania 2000 also features something that prior WCW games lacked, and that was the various superstar entrance themes. And rather than try to recreate these with the N64 sound synth setup, they just took the actual themes and compressed them to such a degree that they kind of sound like crap, but they're in there and they complement the wrestler entrances, some of which include slideshow Titantron recreations that play in full screen for some wrestlers, which is going above and beyond, and that's a cute little thing. They didn't really need to do that. Now, of course, much like those other Aki games, the actual in-game music and such is your standard synth stuff, generic rock-sounding tunes. Some good tunes, I guess, but nothing I'll remember after the fact. Sound effects and some brief vocal bites are in there. They sound fine, I guess. Not much else to add there. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the little animated referee that would show up during decisions and pinfall counts and such. I thought that was a cute feature. The intro video is not as cool as the one in Revenge, but, you know, that's a hard one to top, I think. By the way, kudos for giving the Stooges Real American. SmackDown didn't have Real American, so I guess Nintendo would so not do... never mind. Overall, THQ's first foray into the WWF video game circle was a strong one, and WrestleMania 2000 is not only a superb wrestling game, but continues the tradition of superb wrestling games on the Nintendo 64. A new roster of wrestlers, new settings, and some new modes to play with, along with a fully functional creator wrestler, brings it a step or two above Aki's previous WCW offerings, but even on its own merits, WrestleMania 2000 is a damn fine game, and whether you'd prefer this or the follow-up, either way, you can't go wrong. This is top-notch stuff, and a fun time to be had by all.